death row pardon, 2 minutes too late.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week, Russell Glasser again.
Hello.
Been a month. Good to have you back.
Yeah, isn't it ironic?
Isn't it?
Don't you think?
This is the Atheist Experience. It's a live call-in public access program. We broadcast live on Sundays from 4:30 to 6 p.m., and it's rebroadcast later in the week. The audio portion of the program is available for download from the website and via podcast. You can visit www.atheist-community.org or www.atheist-experience.com to get more information on downloading the audio. To those of you who have been listening via podcast and download, thank you. Welcome. Keep spreading the word. We're getting a lot of mail from listeners from all around the world, and it's always good to get feedback on how to improve things and other topics that you might want to discuss. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors an internet audio program called The Nonprofits. It's a bi-weekly program. You can go to freethoughtradio.com or nonprofitsradio.com. It is .com. Our next live episode will be May 6th. You can get information about how to tune in at the website.
I don't think that we're going to be able to broadcast on May 6th.
We're going to skip the 6th show?
Yes.
Yeah, we've been broadcasting the nonprofits from my place, and I'll be out of town.
International Dillahunty Studios, as Jeff likes to call it.
I'll actually be out of town next week, so there won't be a nonprofits, probably. There will, however, be an Atheist Experience, and for those of you who have been missing hosts of Atheists past, Ashley will be here filling in for me next week, and if those of you who've been watching for a long time, you're in for a treat. Again, you can listen to the Nonprofits live. You can chat online with us.
The next date would be May 20th.
20th would be the next one. So we'll get that information changed. The ACA also sponsors a lecture series on the third Sunday of every month. The next lecture will be May 21st, and will feature the ACA's own Mark Lowy. And the topic will be, I kid you not, muon-catalyzed nuclear fusion. So we cover a lot of ground in our lectures, and this coming month's lecture looks to be a really good one. In addition to the programs and the lectures, the ACA also sponsors a number of social events, including Atheist Happy Hour on Thursdays. That's at 7:30 at Ninfa's on Anderson near 183 and I-35. And also the cast and crew of this program get together for dinner after the show. We're currently going to Threadgills on Riverside. This program goes off at 6 o'clock, and we normally get there between 6:30 and 6:45. All atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to attend and join us. You do not have to be a member to participate in any of the events. And a few special notes. This Thursday, May 4th, be the National Day of Prayer, and the ACA will be involved in a protest for the National Day of Prayer. That begins at from 12 to 1 p.m. At the corner of 11th and Congress. There may be a breakfast brunch type thing beforehand. Keep your eyes on the website for more information. And there's also a number of discussion lists that you can join through the website to get more information about other events. And next Sunday, May 7th, will be the ACA board elections. For all the members, it's time to vote. There'll be somebody on hand to renew your membership. If that needs to happen, you can get more information on this and all of the events on the website, atheist-community.org. And for those of you who don't make it in over the telephone today or don't want to, you can always email us at tv@atheist-community.org, and we'll gladly take your comments. We try to respond to everybody as quickly as we possibly can. We've been getting a lot of good feedback from that lately, and from all around the world, and we appreciate it, and we try to answer your questions as best possible.
Yeah, it's taken a while, but now that our podcast has kind of caught on, we're sort of getting flooded with emails every week, and we've got people from Ireland and Canada and all over the place.
Yeah, it's been great. And I think that's it for all the regular announcements, so Russell's going to give us some learning, some book learning.
If you've been watching the show for more than a few months, then you'll know that I was the host of the show for about half a year before I left to go to graduate school and study advanced computer science. And so for the past few months, I've been taking a couple of really hard classes. One of them is called data mining, which is basically the art of crunching numbers, lots and lots of numbers with a computer. And I was trying to come up with a way that I could apply my new book learning, as it were, to the show without putting everybody to sleep. And one way that, well, we consider this show part entertainment and part educational outreach, and one topic that we cover a lot on the show is basically logical fallacies. We talk about argument techniques sometimes, and there's a very specific category of logical fallacy, which I think I'm a little more qualified to talk about these days, which is how to lie with numbers. It's actually really not as it's really not as hard as you would think. There's a quote which on the internet is attributed almost equally to either Mark Twain or Benjamin Disraeli, and I have no idea which one of them really said it. But the quote is, "There are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics," which is the name of my topic today. And the reason it's actually easy to lie with numbers is because a lot of people not only aren't too good at math, but are actually weirdly proud of being not good at math. I mean, there's one of my favorite books on the subject is called Innumeracy. It's by a mathematician named John Allen Paulos, and he makes up the word innumeracy to sort of encapsulate the fact that a lot of people are illiterate when it comes to numbers. And not only are they illiterate, but they take a bizarre kind of pride in their innumeracy in a way that they wouldn't be proud of not understanding other things. Like, if somebody didn't know how to read, he would at least be embarrassed about it.
Right.
Whereas you hear people saying, oh, you know, confronted with a simple word problem, oh, that's math, I was never any good at math.
Yeah.
You also don't hear that in relation to some really complicated topics like, say, religion or politics. Absolutely everyone has an opinion on that, whether they know anything about it or not. So because so many people are enumerate, it makes it really easy for somebody who knows just a little bit of math to baffle you with a bunch of equations, throw a bunch of numbers up there which look intimidating, and very few people are going to take the time to try to figure out what's really going on there because they're proudly not good at math. So I'm going to be presenting today a series of basically different ways to be misled by numbers. And one of them comes from this recent prayer study. Now, I was going to present this topic last month originally, so this was more timely back then. But there was a recent study done in which people in a double-blind study prayed for some patients who were undergoing heart surgery and not for others. And there were three groups. One of the groups was being prayed for and knew that they were being prayed for. One of the groups was told that you might be prayed for, but they weren't. And a third group was told you might be prayed for, and they were. And the results of this study were prayer had no significant effect on the number of patients experiencing complications after surgery, but patients who knew they were being prayed for had significantly more complications after surgery than patients who were prayed for but weren't sure they were being prayed for. So basically, prayer doesn't help, but knowing that you're being prayed for hurts. Now, from a scientific standpoint, I'd say this study is actually not all that interesting because as far as I'm concerned, there's really not that much reason to believe that prayer does anything. And of course, after this study came out, there was a flurry of religious people writing on their blogs, coming up with all kinds of reasons why this study should be dismissed. It should never have been run in the first place. Why it's ridiculous to think that you can put God in a test tube. You know, how dare they even try to pigeonhole God into science? Which is kind of funny because I distinctly remember a few years ago that there used to be studies coming out which seemed to prove that that prayer did something. I don't remember all the details now, but I think it was a very tiny effect, like it was 57% of people who got prayed for, or you were 7% more likely to improve with prayer, which is a small number but statistically significant. And so you got to wonder, I mean, back then those people weren't saying, why, that's crazy. I mean, you can't prove prayer by a scientific study. When it looked like it was going their way, they were only too happy to accept the study.
Yep.
So, what's going on? One of the most important ways that you can lie with statistics is to leave out relevant information. And I'll give you a political example. Because everybody's familiar with these little presidential polls that say, do you believe that the president is currently doing a good job or a bad job? Right now it's around 32%. But what a lot of people don't look at is the little disclaimer number, which says it's a plus or minus 3% margin of error. Now what that means is probably it's no more than 35% and no less than 29%. In other words, it's in this little window, so it's definitely around about 32%, but there's some wiggle room there. What you don't realize is that there's actually a chance that it could fall outside that range. I mean, this makes sense if you think about it, because say that a survey company calls 1,000 people and says, do you approve or disapprove of the president's job performance right now? Well, maybe the number of people, if you surveyed all 300 million Americans, really is 32%, but you could just happen to call 1,000 people who all think he's doing a great job. Is that likely? No, and you can calculate exactly how likely it is, but that would be boring. But the point is, there's always a chance that something will appear to be statistically significant, but it's not. And what an unethical pollster could do is cherry pick a bunch of different polls. Like say he really had a vested interest in showing that people like the president's job. He could call 100 people and find out it's 32%, and he could say, oh, that can't be right, throw it out. Then he could call 100 more people, and it could be like he could get lucky and it's 40%, but still not high enough, throw it out. He could call, and then he calls 100 more people. He does this like 1,000 times, and then one of those times he happens to get lucky, and the more times you run the same experiment, the more likely it is that somewhere you'll get a result that's way outside the normal range. So he finds, aha, the president is at 60% approval. I'll report on that. Now, unless you reported all the times when you got completely different results, you are lying.
Yeah, there's also, you see this a lot on websites and blogs where somebody will run a poll just to the people on their blog and say, we had 300 respondents and they 80% of them approve what the president's doing. But your population sample is wrong.
But this is Bill O'Reilly's blog, right?
Because the only people who are going to come read the stuff you're putting out anyway are people who think that. So, yeah, it's another little way to manipulate the data.
Right, so that's one of several ways to leave out relevant information, and I believe that's what happened in these prayer surveys, because in these prayer studies, because who runs the prayer studies? I think most scientists agree that there's almost no point in doing this sort of study. So on average, most of the people who do studies like this are going to be people who have a vested interest in proving that prayer works. So you have to wonder, how many studies did they run that says, nope, prayer doesn't do anything at all, in order to get the one sample that says, oh yes, 7% more people had a good recovery than people when they were prayed for than when they weren't. That's one thing that is kind of difficult to find out. There's a second way that you can lie by leaving out relevant information, and that's forgetting to consider the larger context. And I'll give you an example of things that I think we've gotten calls about this in the past. There's a study of doctors that came out in the Journal of General Internal Medicine last July, surveying how many doctors believe in God. You know about this?
No, I hadn't heard about it.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we haven't been called, but I've seen it. You know, people will point out that in this study, they found that 76% of medical doctors believe in God, and 59% of people of doctors believe in some sort of afterlife. And then they'll say, you know, you can see where the argument will go from there. They'll say, aha, doctors, they're very smart people, and they study the human body, and they must understand how intricately designed it is. So if 76% of doctors believe that there's a God, then surely you must understand that due to the best study, they've come to that conclusion.
And the doctor's probably smarter than you and probably knows more things than you. How dare you assume that you could be smarter than that doctor?
Yeah, you're getting into the spirit of it. Can you figure out what's wrong with that, though? No?
No, go right ahead.
76% of doctors believe in God, and I have no reason to doubt that this survey is accurate. But 90% of the general population believes in God.
Aha.
I mean, come on. If you've been an atheist or not everybody knows that most people are religious. That's just obvious. But if 90% of the general population believes in God, and 76% of doctors believe in God, then suddenly these facts become interesting in the opposite way. Because actually, if you are a doctor, then 14% less of you believe in God, or 16% less of you believe in God than if you hadn't been a doctor. Which means, if you're going to use a doctor as an authority, medical training makes you less likely to believe in God. And in the same study where I found that 90% of doctors, 90% of all people believe in God, this was from a survey done in the peer-reviewed journal Nature in 1997. 90% of the general public believe in God, 40% of scientists believe in God, and 7% of the members of the National Academy of Sciences, which is like the top tier of the pinnacle of achievement in the scientific field, only 7% of them believe in God. So what that shows is the more formal training you have in science, the less likely you are to believe in God. There's another example that's not religiously based, and so it's a little off topic for the show, but what the heck, because I find this hilarious. This is from Britt Hume a couple of years ago from Fox News, and he was trying to prove that Iraq was actually going great. And he said 277 U.S. soldiers have now died in Iraq, which means that statistically speaking, U.S. soldiers have less of a chance of dying from all causes in Iraq than citizens have of being murdered in California, which is roughly the same geopolitical size. That's another huge example of lying by leaving out important information. What he's forgetting is, if you're only going to consider the soldiers who have died, there are a total of 140,000 soldiers there, of whom 277 have died, whereas there are 34 million people in California. So when you factor out the numbers, you actually find that you're 60 times more likely to die as a soldier in Iraq than you are to die in California. The one way I like to illustrate that is basically, how many people have ever died on the planet Pluto? None, right?
Well, you don't know that.
As far as we know, there have been no news reports of people dying on Pluto, which means Pluto is an incredibly safe place to be. Why,
Yeah.
if we would all move to Pluto,
Nobody would ever die.
nobody would die. That's right.
We've discovered right here on the Atheist Experience the key to eternal life.
That's it.
Pluto. Not the Disney character. Gosh.
So that basically covers one category of lying with statistics, leaving out relevant information. A second category of lying with statistics comes from a fallacy which is known to fancy pants education types as post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means coming
after this, therefore because of this.
Thank you. After this, therefore because of this. Let me give you, so basically when you talk about post hoc ergo propter hoc related to statistics, this means basically attributing too much importance to correlation. And I'll give you an example. A study shows that if you take a bunch of kids and you give them the same standardized test, there is a strong correlation between kids who have larger feet and how well they did on the test. So the bigger feet the kids had, the better they did. Now, so there's definitely correlation there. There's a strong correlation, but what they don't tell you is that the kids who were given this test were of all different age ranges, from let's say 6 to 12 years old. The bigger kids had bigger feet, and the bigger kids were also older, and so they had higher test scores. This kind of illustrates the point that when you find that two things are correlated, even though it's definitely true that they're correlated, and you can rule out coincidence or dishonestly running a bunch of tests over and over again, until you get the right result. Even if you find that there's definitely a relationship between the two, you're not necessarily justified in saying that one thing causes the other. It could be that A causes B, it could be that B causes A, or it could be, in this case, that there's a third factor, like how old you are, that causes both big feet and high test scores. There's another example which I find really funny. This is a true study that was done that found that ice cream sales are strongly correlated to shark attacks. So if you wanted to prevent people from getting attacked by sharks, the thing to do would be to ban sales of ice cream. Not really. Actually, all the study shows is that people eat a lot of ice cream in the summer. Right. And they go swimming a lot in the ocean in the summer, and then they get attacked by sharks.
Yeah, and while those particular examples kind of demonstrate the extreme nature and why it's a logical fallacy, there's lots of other things, and your dad has a saying about the aspirin and prayer.
Oh, right. He says, let's see, I had a headache, and so I took an aspirin and I prayed to God, and my headache went away. So praying cured me.
Yeah, and you could do the same thing, and a lot of believers often do, by just omitting the aspirin. I had a headache, I prayed, the headache went away. Therefore, my prayer caused the headache to go away, when the headache may well have gone away on its own after time.
I don't think anybody has headaches that last forever, so sooner or later your headache is going to go away, even if you don't take an aspirin.
There's lots of that with, I've lost my car keys, and if I say a prayer, all of a sudden I remember where my car keys were, so it was the prayer that did it. And in actuality, it's more likely that just taking a minute to calm down and get over the anxiety of losing your keys will allow your brain to process a little better, and you'll actually remember where you left your keys.
Right, and even if and there's a window of time when you can accept the results. Like, even if you find your car keys, 3 days later, you can still say, well, I did pray to find my car keys. So that was the second category of lying with statistics. The third category is something that's known as the gambler's fallacy. And this one is really tempting. In fact, so tempting that some really smart people believe it. Like, for instance, Edgar Allan Poe. A lot of people know Edgar Allan Poe as a poet and horror writer, but in fact he wrote a lot of mystery stories too, in the vein of Sherlock Holmes. And in one story called The Mystery of Marie Rogêt, he has his narrator say, nothing is more difficult than to convince the merely general reader that the fact of sixes having been thrown twice in succession by a player at dice is sufficient cause for betting the largest odds that sixes will not be thrown in the third attempt. A suggestion to this effect is usually rejected by the intellect as once. It does not appear that the two throws which have been completed and which now lie absolutely in the past can have influence upon the throw which exists only in the future. So Edgar Allan Poe was really frustrated because he wasn't able to convince people that if you roll 2 sixes in a row on your dice, then it's less likely than 1/6 that you'll roll another 6.
Yeah, it's the I'm due for a win. I've
due
lost
for a
5
win,
times
yes.
in a row, or you're playing something like Baccarat,
Right.
and it's come up player 4 times in a row. The next time you got to go for the bank because the odds are that it's going to happen. But the thing is
Right,
that
either that or you'll go broke.
right.
I mean, the fact is that over a long period of time, you're not likely to throw 3 sixes in a row.
Well, see, the actual bet, the thing that would make it valid would be if before you threw any, you bet on whether or not sixes would come up 3 times in a row.
Exactly.
Because that's looking at the total picture and not an individual roll.
But once you've thrown 2 sixes in a row, there's no difference in the odds. And that's like something that people do a lot in roulette, for instance. They'll say, okay, here's my strategy. Wait for a long run of blacks to happen and then bet on a red. Well, it's just as likely that, in fact, you're getting in on the short end of an even longer run of blacks, and you'll just get a black again. The odds are no different when there have just been a bunch of blacks to get another black than at any other time. Which brings me to my favorite joke about math. And there aren't that many out there. But anyway, it goes like this. A mathematician was deathly afraid of flying. He would never set foot on an airplane, and his friends always wondered what the problem was. And he said, well, you see, due to my precise calculations, I've figured out the exact probability of there being a bomb aboard the airplane that I'm on. And they're low, but they're not low enough for my comfort, and I'm very afraid that there's going to be a bomb on my plane someday, so I will not fly. Well, a few months go by, and the mathematician's friend boards a plane one day and sees the mathematician there in the plane with him. And he says, what happened to your calculations? I thought that you had figured out the exact probability of there being a bomb and you were still scared to fly. And he said, well, yes, but you see, afterwards I calculated the exact probability of there being 2 bombs on the plane, and that was so low that I felt there was nothing to worry about. So now I carry my own bomb. And I think that about covers it.
All right. Well, there's another joke that I heard the other day, which is math related, which is that topologists can't tell the difference between the donut and the coffee cup.
Yeah, I've heard that one. So but you'd have to know something about topology to get it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you talked about early on, and the phone was up as a reminder. It's a live call-in program. We'll get to calls.
See the clock
very shortly.
Crane. Okay.
It's like coming up on the hour.
Right.
And we'll take your calls, and if you don't get through on the telephone, you can email tv@atheist-community.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But early on, you were talking about the fact that so many people are bad at math and possibly proud about being bad at math, and how that's really easy to prey on. And if you think, I was thinking about that earlier, going back to kind of like my history, there are people like Max Maven, for example, and other mentalists. They go by, they pretend to be able to read your mind or control your mind, etc., as a form of entertainment. And a lot of what they do is just math. They set up, you've seen probably on TV specials at some point, there'll be, 20 cards all across the screen, and you're going to put your finger on one, and he's going to go through and eliminate it, and then you're going to move a little bit. And the thing is that, like you were saying, the math behind it is so confusing to the normal person that it looks like magic.
Right.
That it looks like he's controlling your movements or reading your mind. And I'm not a math whiz by any means, but the general public being bad at math, it seems to me that they're eager to rely on, well, information that supports what they already believe.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought that being bad at math is sort of more a state of mind. It doesn't necessarily involve, I mean, being good at math doesn't necessarily involve being good at arithmetic.
Right.
Because a lot of people, you know, can't multiply two numbers in their heads, but there's a certain type of logical thinking which involves asking yourself, what information are they leaving out of this equation? And if you added it in, what would change? That, I think, is kind of not out of the reach of your normal innumerate person.
Yeah, I think it falls under just kind of teaching yourself how to think skeptically, how to think critically about analyzing situations, and, you know, are they really giving me all the information? You know, taking a look at the prayer studies. You know, this past Thursday, the 27th, clergy from around the Washington D.C. and Maryland area got together to pray for lower gas prices, and well, we all know how well that worked. And it would be very tempting to get on.
I filled my tank for $1.50 today.
Yeah,
didn't you?
It would be very tempting to get on and say something, you know, like, "See, here we go. Here's just one more demonstration that prayer does nothing." The problem is that would be, you know, flawed, because that's a single data point, and that's something we see from, you know, a lot. You take a look at the methodology of somebody who's put together a poll or a set of statistics and information, and you find. Either their sample size was too small, or the type of sampled population, et cetera, was incorrect and had some inherent bias that wasn't noticed, you know, during the actual study. So it's just I don't know. There's a lot of bad numbers.
Like doing an internet poll, which is why, by the way, internet polls are absolutely useless for the most part. But, you know, the example you gave earlier of doing an internet poll on, say, the Fox News website,
right,
where you ask how many of them approve of, approve of the president's job, you're going to get a hugely skewed sample size. Same as if you had run the same thing on the Air America site.
Yeah.
Instead of 32% approval, you'd get like 2% approval.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you're automatically limiting your sample to those people who have access to the internet, or in the case of telephone polls, those people who have not only telephones, but telephones which you can access. You know, maybe perhaps you're pulling numbers out of the phone book, and some people are unlisted. So there's inherent bias in your population sample for a lot of those. Want to go on and take some callers?
Sure, let's go for it.
We've got, is it Jack?
I'd like to talk to you about your statement that 90% of the people in the United States believe in God.
I don't think that the number is actually accurate.
I think it's slightly less than that. This was in 1997. Matt thinks it's about 86% right now.
Well, close enough.
Okay.
But, you know, there's so much prejudice against atheists that, for instance, if you were a politician and you admitted you were an atheist, you'd be instantly put out of office almost.
Yeah, well, you've heard about maybe this recent survey that says that atheists are the least trusted group in America.
Yeah, so, you know, I would think in a poll like the one you're talking about where 86% of the people claim to believe in God, that least trust.
Are we losing?
So it sounds like he was going to say that people would, even atheists would maybe lie a little and say that they were theists just so the survey person wouldn't think badly of them.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, you never really know, and you know, a lot depends on how anonymous the survey is.
Yeah, well, you know, the anonymity of a survey is kind of a two-edged sword, because the purpose of it is so that, you know, we don't know who you are, you can tell us whatever you want. Right. And then, as we've seen with the internet anonymity, as soon as nobody knows who you are and you can say whatever you want, you can say all kinds of outlandish stuff, which you may or may not actually believe in or agree with.
Right.
Just for the sake of, you know.
Look at the names on those online petitions sometimes. You'll see an awful lot of people signing as Mickey Mouse and,
right,
you know, George Bush and all those other things.
Let's go on to, is it Dave?
Hey, yeah, hey guys.
How you doing, Dave?
Hi, fine, thank you. Listen, I just wanted to, this is kind of off topic. I guess it's a little bit on topic. But I just wondered if you guys had seen that documentary, The God Who Wasn't There, and just what you thought of it.
Not only have we seen it, and I own it, but there's a good chance that you'll be seeing it on public access soon.
Oh, cool.
We have permission to broadcast it from the producer, the director. and we're in the middle of working up. I think the plan is to, because it's an hour and 2 minutes long, is to block off a 90-minute segment, not necessarily this one, but some other one. Have a little discussion beforehand and afterwards, and play it on the air.
Wow, so you really thought it was well done and all? I thought I liked it, but I thought it was a little kind of like one-trick pony-ish. You know, I mean, he sort of had one argument.
Yeah,
you danced around with.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's the end-all, be-all, and being rather short and to the point. You know, there's a lot more to the issue about, you know, did Jesus actually exist? Is belief justified, you know, based on evidence? It's such a complicated topic that you can't really nail it in an hour. But I did think for what he covered in an hour's time, he did really well. And it's a movie that, while it doesn't include everything we need to know about the subject, it's a good introduction for people, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get it on the air.
Yeah, that's true. I can see that. It'd be you know, it would wake a lot of people up if nothing else. Yeah. Especially, I just thought that last scene, I got a real kick out of that I am not afraid, you know, that in the church. That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, take care, guys.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, you've watched that, haven't you?
I have not seen that, actually, although I've done some background reading on the guys who did it and discovered that while they are kind of persuasive, in my opinion, they're not like mainstream historians. I mean, their claims and of their research haven't been published in any, you know, mainstream journals, which makes it sort of like subject to the same problems as creationism.
Well, there's some really good discussions in there. You know, you've got some comments from people like Sam Harris, and I'm forgetting the others off the top of my head, but it's well done. As short as this, we'll try and get it on the air sometime and let you see it.
I had a historian on a message board, you know, on the internet. He can claim to be a historian, but I think he's right. That basically, when you're dealing with something as far in the past as Jesus, with such awful documentation, you tend to go with the Occam's razor approach, and in this case, historians basically say we have no particular reason to doubt that there was a guy named Jesus.
Yeah,
and the evidence that there wasn't is less convincing than the evidence that there was.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why when asked, I've often said that, you know, I don't have any particular objection to the idea that maybe somebody named Jesus existed. Perhaps he was, you know, a rabbi or teacher. Perhaps some of the events described may have occurred, but there's not sufficient evidence to believe that the biblical word-for-word story of his life is accurate in any way. Especially, you know, given all the surrounding issues with, you know, forming a religion.
If you just consider the mythology that's sprung up around Elvis, for instance, we know that there was a real guy named Elvis, but that doesn't mean that all the stuff about aliens or whatever is true.
Although, you never know. As you saw a few minutes ago on the screen, they flashed, and we were busy talking. I didn't get around to it. As a reminder, the cast and crew go to dinner after the program. The show's over at 6. We'll get there about 6:30, 6:45 at Threadgill's on Riverside. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us. Callers, guests, ACA members, whatever.
There's the address.
And there's the address again. Let's go on to, is it Harry?
Yeah, you guys there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I've got a reading assignment for you. It's called Breaking the Spell. Religion is a Natural Phenomenon by Daniel C. Dennett.
Yeah, I'm reading it now.
Okay, Darwin's Dangerous Idea.
Got it.
I've read that one.
Is religion good for you? Should it be the basis for morality?
Yep. I'm a big fan of Dennett and have, if not all, then nearly all of his books, and I'm going through the newest one now.
Well, I haven't finished this one, and I thought maybe you could save me some time and give me a book review.
I was going to say, I can't take on any serious reading assignments for the next 2 years because I'm going to be swamped in classwork the whole time.
Okay.
I wouldn't review the newest one right now because I'm not finished with it. The other ones being
Darwin's... Well, give me a quick rundown of Darwin's Dangerous Idea. Have you read that?
Yeah, it's his take looking at evolution as the source, an impetus for psychological things like morality.
Got it.
he builds up over a series of books, Consciousness Explained, Freedom Evolves, Darwin's Dangerous Idea, little bits and pieces about the idea of compatibilism, where you can live in a potentially deterministic world and yet still have free will in the only sense that matters, and that you're able to actually make choices and do things based on information and the consequences that happen from it.
Well, you see, telling us that we can be good people without religion. He keeps pushing this morality thing.
Well,
yeah, that's part of it.
Dennett is an atheist who tends to sort of preach to the choir. So he's not really telling you you can be moral without being God, because I think he would assume that all his readers already know that.
He's actually justifying.
Yeah, but he's laying out a framework for morality, which kind of is a sticking point for a lot of people.
Okay, well, I enjoy your show. Some of your calls are kooks, but all in all, you guys know how to handle it. So thanks, and have a good evening.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Yeah, I've been a big fan of Harry and of Harry. I've been a big fan of Daniel Dennett for a while now, and there's a lot of difficult topics. We had a caller not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. Towards the end of the show, wanted to call in and talk about determinism and free will. with like 2 minutes to go.
Right.
And you just don't have time to nail that kind of discussion. And also, one of the things that I started to point out, but I don't know that I did well enough, is that it's not really relevant to the show, because if you were to ask a bunch of Christian theologians, for example, whether or not they happen to believe in free will, you're going to get different answers there too. You've got Paul in Romans talking about people complaining that if God's in control, then how can he possibly punish us? Because, obviously we don't have any free will. And Paul's answer isn't, oh yes, you do have free will. It's, how dare you question God? He can do whatever the hell he wants with you. He's the potter and you're the clay. He can make you whatever you want.
And then, of course, there's a branch of Christianity called Calvinism, which is completely based on the idea that
predestination.
Everybody at birth, it's already decided whether they're going to go to heaven or hell.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can change. And I know atheists who don't believe in free will. I know Dennis on the Non-Profits has had some huge arguments with me and Jeff about his disbelief in free will. Well,
I think a lot of it comes down to how you define it, and it would be an interesting topic for a show, but it's one that I'd prefer that we actually prepare for, rather than trying to do off the cuff. With a lot going on, I can't even obviously give a good book report on one of Dennett's books from ages back. But let's go on to, is it Phil?
Yes, it is.
Hey, Phil, how you doing?
Hi.
Fine. How y'all gentlemen doing?
Pretty good.
Y'all readers of the Chronicle by any chance? The Austin Chronicle?
Rarely, from time to time.
Well, there was a thing this last Thursday in the Chronicle, Letters at 3 a.m. Perhaps you're familiar with that Michael Ventura's writings. Well, let me just bring up speed. What he wrote was basically the United States Air Force Academy, and up till now I've heard touch and go stories about evangelical Christians basically harassing other cadets and things like that. Well, in Michael Ventura's story, which I encourage you to read, he's basically saying that this administration and the Air Force in general is being systematically populated by evangelical Christians, starting at the Air Force Academy, which is basically comprises the officer corps of that service.
Yeah, we had actually covered that on previous shows, and we're happy to point out that they did do an inquiry and pretty much shut down the nonsense that was going on there,
well,
at least as far as we know.
According to Mr. Ventura, he cites several different articles by mainstream media dating as lately as 2005. This is not the case.
Well, yeah, we did this a few months ago.
Okay, well, in any case, his idea was basically that the Air Force is the smallest military force that we have with the fewest number of people that can basically cause the most damage. And, and basically, when you start staffing the Air Force Academy officer corps with these evangelical Christians, given the climate that we're in today, with basically it seems to be a holy war between the Muslims and the West, which I guess is, you could consider Christianity. That's a scary proposition to me. And so you're writing this off as non-credible, this story, or?
It depends on how it's being spun. If it's, obviously we know there were problems at the Air Force Academy, and they did manage to reach some resolution and try and improve the amount of tolerance. Basically, there was a lot of intolerance toward non-Christians, and there's been a lot of complaints about putting evangelicals in key strategic positions. I don't necessarily, if the article is spinning this as some sort of conspiracy to, once we get all the evangelicals into the key positions, we can take over the world, then I kind of got to chuckle.
I wouldn't rule it out, frankly.
But
I mean,
I think that's a little too extreme. But I do think that there is a very strong power element to it, and if you get your like-minded people who are in your pocket into the key locations, then you can exercise far greater power and control than you could otherwise.
Well, the gist of it, the crux, I don't know the way you could sum this article up, is that he's basically saying that you want people in these silos and in these bunkers that have this religious fervor, so that when they're asked to push the button and launch a bomb on, let's say, Iran, heaven forbid that ever happens, and nobody's even considering that they would actually follow through on those orders.
And see, I have a fundamental problem with that, because having been in the military and understanding how military training works, you don't need an evangelical who happens to, be expecting an apocalypse or anything like that in order to find somebody who's willing to push that button. All you need is a malleable mind put into a position where they have to respond to authority. It's just instilled in them, and it doesn't require any religious belief. It's a kind of
Isn't that pretty much what Dr. Strangelove was all about?
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of people who may not have necessarily any belief in a God, who, when you got them locked down in that silo and their fingers on the button and the order comes in to push it, they're pushing it because they've been trained to follow the orders. It's not their job to question. They don't have enough information from outside to make a decision, so they're forced to rely on their superiors.
Yeah, and I would think that there's a variety of sort of severe maniacal patriotic fervor, which some people have, that sort of reminds me of religion, in which anybody who questions the way the country or their particular political party is going or doing is some kind of traitor.
All right, guys. So I guess I'm just a conspiracy theorist, and
I
didn't mean you.
I thought I mostly agreed with you. There's a limit to how far towards this. Let's get people in position. To me, there's a limit as to how much power they can actually attain.
Well, we did have a general. I don't know if he was Air Force or not, but he was walking around in a church in his military brigade, talking about how our God's bigger than their God.
Yeah, I remember
that kind
him.
of talk is scary to me, guys.
Boykin.
Yeah,
General Boykin.
Was he Air Force or Army? Do you know?
I don't remember.
If he was a general, he was probably Army or Marine.
Okay. All right,
but yeah, that type of talk's definitely scary to me. Anytime you get religious nuts in positions of power, that's scary. I just don't tend to go to the extent of thinking that they're going to be able to acquire the amount of power that would justify some of the conspiracy claims. Now, other claims which somebody else may write off as conspiracy, I wouldn't, because there's a definite push among evangelicals to get evangelicals and fundamentalists
by
in position
definition,
of power.
That is a conspiracy. I mean,
yes.
There's definitely a conspiracy. The question is whether it's a successful one or not.
And how nefarious, I guess it is.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, and one thing that I think,
when I say conspiracy, I just mean several people conspiring to achieve some sort of result.
Right.
All right, guys, let's move on to another caller. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we were talking about it before. The getting people in positions of power that agree with you, you can say yes, it's a conspiracy. Okay, I'm involved in several conspiracies when you're talking in terms like that. None of them require me to put on a tinfoil hat. I don't dismiss claims like the last caller was talking about. There's obviously an effort to get evangelicals in key positions. What the end purpose is, I definitely, for most of them, having known a few fundamentalists and evangelicals, I think they're probably doing it for what they think is our own good, or for the better interest of the country, or for the glory of Jesus.
Right, but they also believe the world's going to end in their lifetime.
Right.
So their idea of what's for our own good might not be the same as my idea.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why I think whether they're actually out for some nefarious purpose or just trying to do what they think is right, we have an obligation to work in opposition to those ends. If they're not upfront with exactly what they want to do and why, that's a question that needs to be answered. You can't just sit in the shadows and expect people to blindly follow your lead because you happen to have the power at the moment. I'm all about questioning authority and challenging when the questions aren't answered. So, and we got Jay.
Yeah, I've got a question, because in the Bible it always tells you there's a life here on earth and an eternal life. Mm-hmm. What about this dude that comes on Crossing Over, John Edwards?
John Edwards.
Yeah, only baloney.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
are you familiar with the idea of cold reading?
Yes.
So he's like,
you can
okay,
be led into believing something where you can. I mean, he gives you an idea and you think about it.
Yeah, he says, I'm sensing that you want to contact somebody named Sam, or their name starts with an S, or somebody who knew somebody whose name starts with an S.
Well, that's logic on that, because most of us would.
Yeah.
But what's so strange is that I did know someone that he did pick that one time, and she more or less had a hidden secret, and he hit it right on the head. And that's the only thing that made me, skeptical of a lot of things that would be there. And then I wondered, well, how in the H did he ever know that about her when she really didn't tell it to nobody? But
well, one thing to remember when you're watching John Edwards is that you're watching 30 minutes out of a 2-hour plus.
I think it's more than that, but they record, I think, hours of tape, which is actually a good example of leaving out relevant statistical information, because you get the random window of 30 minutes when it looks like he's just making all hits, and then you throw out the parts where he's just making blind, stupid guesses that nobody agrees to.
I know, but I guess it's pretty good entertainment, though, sometimes when they get caught at something.
I guess having known a lot of people and seen some actual skilled cold readers, John Edwards, almost every single one of them on TV, they're exceptionally bad at cold reading. They're not even at the top of their game. They're on TV. I'm not even completely sure why. Perhaps they have a charismatic personality that convince somebody that they should do that, but they're not even all that great.
Didn't John Edwards pull some sort of asinine stunt after 9/11 to contact the victims or something like that?
I'm not sure if it was him or somebody else. There was a lot of that going on.
Did y'all get to see that though last night? What was it, A&E or one of the other shows where they had the 9/11 Flight 93 was on?
Yeah, it's a new movie. It's in theaters.
It was on TV last night.
Yeah, they were doing a special about it, but there's also...
Well, they showed this in movie form, and where they did the actual audio and part of it, and how they got the... Because I don't have cell phones, and I don't even use a computer at home. I don't like it because we had them at work. You almost go blind off the blank thing. But anyway...
Well, we're both hardcore video gamers, so we won't agree with you there. But
all right, because I got that, because since I'm not up on all this electronic stuff, and the guy, could they pick a thing like a cell phone and talk to them up wherever they were at, coming from California to here on that Flight 93, coming into Washington area, could they pick them up just with that cell phone that far?
Yep.
I mean, I'm wondering on that if that's all recorded accurately or what on it too, because it was.
Well, I would imagine that
they calls me every once in a while in the afternoon when he leaves work, because he goes from way north out of Williamson County going back the way into Hays County. He gets bored, so he says nothing's on the radio, because he says watch the certain channel, pick up the accidents where they are when you come into Austin.
Well, I'm going to assume that some of the movie is based on real recordings and some of it is dramatized. I mean, and you shouldn't get your history from fictional versions.
You probably shouldn't get your history from the History Channel.
That's true too.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Jay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, whenever they're trying to dramatize or sensationalize something, you've got to take it all with a grain of salt, because they're trying to sell something now and not just tell a story. So, is it Bob?
Yeah.
Hey, Bob.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, is this the show?
Yes.
This is
I
a
just
show.
want to say that
This is me talking.
the World Almanac lists 2 billion Christians, 1.6 billion atheists and non-believers, and 1 billion Muslims, etc. So maybe you can let your audience know that we're the second largest group on the planet. That's it. Thank you.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, actually, I had heard that before. Going through, things from adherence.org where they list the number of people who believe in different things worldwide. Yeah, non-believers are the second largest group, according to some statistics. The important thing is
like
that
a fourth.
it's a third to a fourth. The thing is that, and the reason why I don't often tout things like that is that even if it's a good statistic, let's say it's completely accurate, and let's say out of everybody on the planet, a full 35% are non-believers, and it's the second biggest block that there is. It's completely irrelevant to whether or not it's actually true, just like, one of the most common arguments, you've heard through the past from believers is, there are millions and millions of people who believe in Jesus and they can't all be wrong. Yes, actually they can all be wrong. That's the point. Just like they could have all been wrong about a flat earth being held up by 4 pillars, and etc.
Right, and especially when you have so many different groups believing in mutually exclusive things, yeah, a bunch of them are wrong. Even if you think that there is a God, a bunch of them are still wrong about other things.
Right. So for every Christian who's willing to say all them Christians can't be wrong, there's a Muslim who's saying all us Muslims can't be wrong, and there's a handful of us out here who are saying yes, you all can be wrong, and it's not necessarily saying that you are. It's just a matter of until there's sufficient evidence to justify belief isn't warranted. I mean, that's just kind of plain Jane.
And by the way, that one
up.
has a Latin name too. It's called argumentum ad populum.
Yeah.
Populum. Lum. I don't know.
Lum.
It's Latin.
Populum.
It's fancy.
So we have the number up, and as a reminder of a few things going on, I just want to hit again. Thursday, May 4th will be the National Day of Prayer. The ACA will be involved in a protest from noon to 1 at 11th and Congress. More information about that is on the website, and also on the website you can get information if you're an ACA member about the board elections that are coming up next Sunday. As a reminder, I'll be out next Sunday, and Ashley will be back, so those of you who have been missing Ashley, you'll get your Ashley fix next week. And anybody who doesn't get through on the telephone is free to email tv@atheist-community.org, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. Before we get back to some more callers, there's something that's come up lately. Well, it's been around for a while. I mean, I remember being told about it before.
Yeah.
It seems to be gaining in popularity and projecting memes out in, which have shown up in calls to us and on forums and everything else. And it's a program called The Way of the Master, which is hosted by Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron, who you might remember from Growing Pains.
Right. The Weasley little teenager.
Yeah, who found Jesus and got his coworker fired because she was posing Playboy.
That's right, and I've seen those Playboy pictures.
Yeah, she should have stayed on the show, and he should have gone.
That's right. Enough said.
But
I'd like to plug real quick the fact that on the Infidel Guy show, which you can find at infidelguy.com, there is a recent broadcast where Reggie, the Infidel Guy, had a debate with the Way of the Master guy. I think he could have done a little better, frankly, but that's hindsight. But go to infidelguy.com, and he has a podcast just like we do, and it's an interesting show.
Yeah, I'm actually putting together in my off time, what little there is of it, a bit of a rebuttal to some of the things that have come out in The Way of the Master. It wouldn't, originally when I was first told about this, I kind of just ignored it. But it's a series of videos and books and things designed for Christians, specifically for witnessing and apologetics and
a flashy
teaching.
Interactive website where Kirk Cameron talks to you personally.
With noises that are completely annoying. And, there's like an atheist test there. But I was sent back to watch, you can watch the actual videos, they're about 28 minutes long online at various sites. But episode 7 is called "The Beauty of a Broken Spirit: Atheism," and somebody sent that as a link, and I'd seen it before and just kind of shrugged it off. And I don't know, maybe something about me has changed since the first time, or it's because I'm seeing these particular arguments become more popular. I watched it the other day, and within the first 5 minutes, there were so many mistakes and so much offensive, nonsensical crap that I had to actually sit down and start working on rebuttals to some of it. I mean, right off the bat, he starts, this particular episode starts with an interview of an atheist who's trying to express in a really simple fashion that there's a need for empirical evidence of some sort before belief in a God is justified. Not everybody you walk up to on the street to interview is going to be able to explain in strict, structured debate format what they believe and why. And so it's a little dishonest of them to just try and go find an atheist on the street and start asking them questions and then nitpick the phrasing of what they said and why. One of the things that he does right off the bat is he says, if you get a dictionary and look up the word atheism, you'll find it says it's the belief that there's no God. Well, yeah, that's one of the things the dictionary says, and that's a particular phrasing for a strong atheist position. You'll also find a second definition in most of them, which is disbelief or denial in the existence of God or gods. And in some dictionaries, you'll find a third definition that says godlessness/immorality. Ray specifically picks a wording that goes for strong atheism so that he can make a case later in the program that atheism requires omniscience. That because you're saying there absolutely is no God, and I know this for a fact, you must therefore know everything. And the truth is, no, that's not the case. That's not the case for most atheists, and it's not even really true of strong atheism. If atheism, and we've said this before, and this is kind of like the 101 course again, theism goes to what you believe. Whether or not you believe in a God, the question, do you believe that a God exists? If you answer yes, you're a theist. If you answer no, you're an atheist. Notice that nowhere does that claim, I know anything absolutely. What you know, the phrase Gnostic normally applies to. Gnostic, theist, agnostic, theist, Gnostic, atheist, agnostic, atheist. There's information about this on our FAQ at our website where you can get more information about that. But he argues for a specific thing, and Kirk joins in later on, saying that you'd have to have absolute knowledge because there is no God is an absolute statement. But most atheists don't run around, and they can in the colloquial sense just say, I believe that there isn't any God. But most rational atheists, especially in discussions, would say, I don't have a belief in a God. I don't believe that a God exists. You would have to prove this to me. It's not justified on its own and all of those things. And which is one of the reasons why I would say, I'm an agnostic atheist, but only in a very limited sense, because there's a position in strong atheism which I think is completely justified, and that is, I don't believe in unicorns. I'm the equivalent of an atheist with regard to unicorns. I'm also the equivalent of an agnostic because I don't know. I don't have absolute knowledge. There may be a unicorn on some other planet or hidden away invisible in the woods of some island somewhere. But I can say, without anyone getting too upset, there's no such thing as unicorns. Well, yeah, that's a strong position, and it's an absolute, and it's an absolute that's not justified because I don't absolutely know everything. But the overwhelming evidence is such that if I were to say there's no such thing as unicorns, nobody would object. The type of strong atheist that would say there's no such thing as God is doing much the same thing. It's just a shortcut, a shorthand way of getting to the point, and not a logically structured P not P argument. So. Do you have more comments on that?
Nope, you're right.
And you should remember that. Now let's go on. We got, is it Joe Zamecki?
Howdy.
Hey, Joe.
Hi. Excellent, Matt. Great show.
Thanks, sir.
I have a couple of quick points. First of all, on the National Day of Prayer picket, I'm pretty sure that, as usual, there are probably some people who are not atheists who are wondering how we conclude that that event has a government association or is involved with the government somehow. And I want to clarify that because I don't think this has been mentioned. Not only, as usual, there are always some government officials who are at that event and announce themselves as the government officials they are in their positions. There is also the way the National Day of Prayer came into being. Now, I'd like to quickly just read one or two sentences here from the official website of the National Day of Prayer Task Force.
Go for it.
And this explains the origin. The National Day of Prayer, which was established in 1952 by a joint resolution of the United States Congress and signed into law by President Harry S. Truman, as well, that's the sentence. Okay, I need to reread that, but that's essentially how it started. By the government. The government
by
started.
an act of Congress, right?
Yeah, what we find is that this is where the complaint becomes this is a government endorsement of religion or a specific type of religion is when, you know, anybody who wants to has the freedom to go pray on the steps of the Capitol anytime they want as long as it's, you know, allowed. But to specifically set aside time and make official proclamations about and encourage prayer and what we've witnessed
right. Well,
in
I mean,
specific
Bush
is
has plugged the National Day of Prayer in previous years, hasn't he?
I don't know that any president has.
Oh.
I think it's pretty much standard fare of, you know, well, I can't say that for sure because I don't have the records for all. I don't have absolute knowledge of that. But
Well, that website actually goes as far to say that this is not a church-state issue. And so that's one issue we'll be talking about in regards to the church-state violation that's very blatant at that picket. Secondly, also, y'all were talking about polls and surveys that show or seem to show that America is overwhelmingly religious and mostly Christian. And there's one point I always like to make about that. I believe that in America here, we're mostly a secular nation. In other words, in our daily lives as Americans, the average American spends most of their time on secular pursuits.
Sure.
Except for the clergy, of course. But even most Christians, what I have found in talking to them is that they entrust their eternal soul to a particular denomination of a particular religion, and they go every Sunday to listen to someone tell them all about his, in one particular way, and it's very important to them that they get the right denomination, but they entrust their eternal afterlife to one particular group. And without actually being a skeptic like we would and raising our hand during the church service for the question and answer session, which never happens, and to find out more, because it's important. And they say that this is extremely important. But these same people, if they want to get someone to put aluminum siding on their house, they'll ask for references, they'll want to look at past work, they'll call the Better Business Bureau, and even then, they might say, you know, you just don't seem like a reputable enough company, I'm going to go with someone else. And the reason for that is their home is more important to them than their afterlife, of course, and it should be, because there's no evidence of an afterlife. But here and now, in our lives, our real lives, right here and now, these things are important, very important. It's the shelter for your home. And they know that people who work on homes sometimes have done disreputable things in the past, and so there is a system set up whereby any religiously devout religious person can take a course of action that is based on skepticism to protect what is really important to them.
Right. Well, luckily, religious leaders never do anything untrustworthy.
Right. And we can just turn on the TV news and find out that's not true. But
right.
Something else about this picket. Now, this is going to be an event that is exclusively Judeo-Christian. In other words, their own website does talk about the diversity that many people will hope is going to be there. And they say, everybody's welcome to pray to whatever God they want on this day. But we have to be loyal to our volunteers and the founders of this event and the people who are putting it on, which are essentially James Dobson and his wife.
Yeah, well, last year, I haven't seen the prayer for this year, but last year's prayer, its specific phrasing, while they tried to make it as non-denominational as possible, was clearly a Protestant prayer. It's not, this wasn't a prayer that you would find a Muslim praying. It wasn't a prayer that you would necessarily find other or, you know, perhaps Catholics or Hindus or whoever. It was a Protestant prayer. And if you were at the Capitol building here in Austin last year, they put on just one heck of a Protestant worship service, right down to singing songs and had bands and everything else right up there on the steps. it was just like it took me back to, you know, revivals in church from my past. It's absurd for them to pretend that this is an all-inclusive thing, especially when you consider the fact that at its best, it could only be inclusive of those people who have a religious belief that an appeal to the invisible man is worthy.
Well, there you go, and I think many of these National Day of Prayer events are going to continue to do what I've seen at several of them, and that is they feature at least one rabbi on stage. And this is mind-boggling because they don't accept Jesus as their Savior. Well, apparently, you know, you can give or take and leave or take whatever aspect you want in order to get in with the right crowd for that particular time, even if it means throwing away the loyalty to your religion as they might. But this all reminds me of something that Bart Simpson said. He says that Christmas is that day of the year where millions of people all around the world of all different religions and all different faiths come together to worship Jesus Christ. So, with that, I'll leave you all, and thank you very much for talking about the picket.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, have a good day.
Yeah, it's that's this Thursday from noon to 1. More information available at the website. And yeah, as a quick reminder, the cast and crew have been going to dinner after the show. We're currently going to Threadgill's on Riverside. The show's over in about 20 minutes, 6 o'clock. We'll be down there between 6:30 and 6:45. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us. It's like that pretty much every week. And we'll move on
but
to...
But some people don't watch every week.
Some people don't watch every week, and we
Which they
try
should.
to get the reminders out. We've got Kevin?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Hi.
Good. Got a quick question. It's kind of off the subject a little bit, but I'd like to first of all state I am a Christian.
Okay.
And I was interested to find out, or let's get your take on what y'all... I'm in the minority like you guys are in the minority of being atheist. I'm a believer in the extraterrestrial presence.
Does that make you Aurelian? Or no?
Aliens, yes. And how that... what is your take on it? You know, I'm a believer like you in Occam's razor. How could you best define that? What the most probable and most likely answer is typically the correct one?
I think the first question would be, why do you believe?
The simplest answer that explains the available evidence is generally the correct one, although it's a rule of thumb more than an actual rule.
Okay. So we agree on that. Well, what do y'all believe? With all the evidence that's out there, you could prove it in the court of law that they do exist. And
that aliens exist?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Do y'all believe in that? Or
you're claiming that there's sufficient evidence that would actually stand up in court to prove that aliens exist?
Absolutely.
I don't believe that.
I don't believe it either. I'm willing to be convinced, but I don't have that kind of evidence right now.
Yeah, if you want to supply the evidence, that's great. You can actually send it to the email list, and I'll take a look at it.
What I'm saying is that may be your atheist. The evidence is available about the existence of this phenomenon. That if y'all wanted to prove that, you know, well, maybe there isn't a God, well, that there are aliens.
There's no requirement. There's no requirement. Hang on. There's no requirement to prove that there isn't a God. Okay, that's not the way it works. The requirement is to demonstrate that a God actually exists, and the same is true for aliens. Until such time, well, you need to actually provide evidence that shows that aliens exist.
Well, if you do any research on the subject at all, you will quickly find out on your own. You do this, but a lot of people would get stigmatized. You know, I have arguments, and it's not a hobby of mine. I'm intrigued by the fact that the evidence that I'm aware of and I see, and do a Google search on any of it. You can find video evidence. You can find implants. You can find
evidence such as
video evidence. And you can say, well, they're manipulated. How about abduction?
Like video? Somebody had a video camera in an alien spaceship and took video of the aliens, and the picture is clear and not blurry, and they explain things.
Well, okay, you have Occam's razor. Let's apply it to this.
Okay.
Apply it to all the stories, all the millions of people that have come forth with their abduction
Sure, in the simplest form, for each given phenomena that you claim to be evidence for extraterrestrial life, is there an explanation that does not posit the existence of something which isn't proven, namely aliens, and does not include the problems of, traveling multiple light years, etc.? Is there an alternate explanation for those phenomena, right down to abductions and everything else? The answer is yes.
People believing things is not any kind of evidence for anything.
What's the guy on the right saying? Are you saying that there are some physics issues involved, that technology that we know will not allow us to do these things, so it can't happen?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that there are potential problems there, not that we have the answer to everything. The question isn't, the issue isn't to determine just how unlikely this is. It's a matter of providing good scientific evidence for something. Anecdotal claims, for every person who claims to have been abducted by aliens, somebody else thinks they're Napoleon Bonaparte.
Well, see, I think if you research this, and it's something that the atheist community may benefit from, and I'm a Christian, I believe that you can have both. But it seems to me that might be something that you're going to be considered to be a psycho. Or you're Napoleon yourself, and you run into that crowd that you should already know that.
From my point of view, you have extremely low standards of evidence, which is clear from both your belief.
Wait, when you say low standards, what do you mean? When somebody
you're willing to accept, no, you hold on. You're willing to accept as true positions which aren't necessarily justified or aren't necessarily supported by evidence. If somebody claims they've been abducted, you're more than likely to accept that they're telling you the truth than that there's some alternate explanation like psychosis. You have to have standards of evidence that fit in with a model of reality. And as somebody who is, in your case, a Christian, you've accepted something based on faith, based on low standards of evidence, that is your religious belief. And you're doing the same thing with regard to belief in extraterrestrials.
Okay, did you let me back on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, I understand your point, but my point is this. This evidence we're talking about, for instance, Dr. Roger Lear, he's a guy, his father was the father of Learjet. He invented whatever. I'm not a smart guy, but what happened was this guy is a surgeon. This is what he does. And people have come to him claiming to be abducted. They did, and he has a high threshold of he wants evidence, so they do x-rays and they find that there's something in the arm where they say that something was implanted, and they go in, they take this implant out, and they do studies on the implant, and the implant is determined to be non-terrestrial, in that we don't know these elements. They're not consistent.
Okay, you're buying into the biggest bunch of nonsense in existence. There's never, ever been any proof or evidence of anything supernatural. And these claims of, ooh, we found a bit of metal and it's non-terrestrial in origin, do you really think that if somebody found a piece of metal and could demonstrate that its physical makeup was non-terrestrial, that it wouldn't be the biggest news to hit every news channel everywhere?
That's exactly what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that there are studies like this out there. I've given you, if you don't believe
No, this would be common knowledge. This would be common knowledge, just like if Jesus is true and he showed up and appeared to, and appeared to everybody, everybody would already know this. You're making claims about things which are so impactful and would change our worldview and turn everything we know and realize completely upside down, that the mere fact that we don't already all know about and accept this is sufficient to say that your claims are false.
Simply because, okay, now hold on. Don't put me on hold yet. You're saying because if this is true, then everybody would know it and it would be common knowledge, right? That's what you're saying.
I don't necessarily agree that that's true.
You don't think that
Well, I think that that's the danger in this whole thing. That's my question. How can this be held down?
I'm going to say that belief is not the be-all, end-all standard of evidence in either direction. Which means that when you asked earlier if, like, millions of people or whatever you said who believe they've been abducted by aliens could be wrong, the answer is yes, they could be. And could all the people who aren't aware of the existence of aliens also be wrong? The answer is also yes. But believing something is not evidence of anything. People believe all kinds of things, and the way and the way to demonstrate that something is true is not by presenting a guy who's a surgeon and therefore he's very smart and he believes it, so you should trust him. The answer is for him to present his evidence, get it in some peer-reviewed scientific journal so that other scientists can take a look at it and kick it around. Maybe they already have. I just haven't heard of that part. I mean,
well,
you
okay.
you pick the guy who supports your opinion.
Well, it's not an opinion. You asked me for some hard evidence.
Okay.
I'm telling you the hard evidence is there, and you're telling me basically, well, we're not in the room.
So
when
what
he
do
does
the peer-reviewed scientific journals say about it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They don't want this information out there.
So how do you know it's true?
It's a conspiracy. See, if this was true, let's and go back for a second. Let's say it was an item, metal, whatever, and your claim is that it has been proven to be of extraterrestrial origin.
Well, it's been proven to be that we do not know what it is. We're not.
Well,
we are not privy
now,
to
see, now you've completely changed your position.
No, I have
because
not.
Yes, you have.
The element chart does not. Enough of it.
Whoops.
You actually have changed your position.
Did you hang up?
Yeah, you went from a claim of, hey, this is proven to be of extraterrestrial origin, to now we don't know what the answer is. And not knowing something is not proof of something. There's lots of things we don't know, we haven't figured out yet. And at the end, just before you got disconnected, you claimed that there was proof that this was something which didn't appear on the periodic table of elements. If you think that that's true, and that the scientific community hasn't leapt up as a whole to claim these new elements, I don't know what to tell you. You have exceedingly low standards of evidence.
Right. I mean, even if they wanted to disguise, cover up the fact that there were aliens, you'd think they'd at least be interested in the fact that some completely new material has been discovered, and they'd want to catalog its properties and stuff and get a hold of it and experiment on it. And that, I have a hard time believing that absolutely everyone in the scientific establishment is so dead set against letting the proof of aliens out that they would basically avoid doing something that would further their own careers.
Right.
Like research on this incredible new metal.
And it's weird because among some Christians, their claim is that the scientific community as a whole is conspiring to teach the lie of evolution, and it's all to save their careers. So now on one hand you've got them all lying to save their careers for evolution, and on the other you've got them all just ignoring this evidence which would only support the lies that they're supposed to be doing anyway. I don't know. If you'll believe any old thing, sorry. We got, hey, JR.
Hello.
How you doing?
Hi, again.
Okay.
What's concerning me is, I think the thing that needs to be taken into consideration is the source that governs this whole human embodiment and the whole universe that is mechanically structured to, evolve and continue to grow, and the elements that, all embody things that are not man-made and created with mere human intelligence.
I'm afraid we don't understand what you're talking about. Do you have a question or one specific point you wanted to make?
My point is, I heard you previous to this call,
right,
talking about evidence that there's a higher power.
No.
Well, I think that
he was talking about evidence of aliens.
Okay, well, that's just out of a man's imagination. Aliens, that's created within the mind.
Okay.
And stuff like that. But what you need to take into consideration is that man did not prepare from the thoughts of his mind all of what you see around you.
No, the world is real. We agree with you.
We agree.
There's
we didn't
a world.
Create the world out of our thoughts.
Yes. So I guess my question now is, What do you What do you think created this? How did this come about?
We don't know. We know what science has discovered about a long way back, but past a certain point, there's basically no way of knowing. Now, how do you know what you're about to say?
I'm just going on based on the whole human existence.
Okay, well, tell me what you think the source is. Let's cut to the chase, because these calls tend to go kind of on a roundabout route.
I think the source has to be something spiritual.
Okay, then provide evidence that this spiritual thing exists, and we'll discuss it.
Actually, if you provide evidence that any spiritual thing exists, that would be helpful.
The fact that you're talking and...
No, we're not spiritual. We're actual physical things, so we're not proof that a spiritual thing exists.
Okay, what powers that? What powers your movement?
Energy.
From the sun.
Okay, when the sun goes down and the moon comes up,
no, you see, things
would not
store heat.
exist. Am I right?
Your body stores heat. You have chemicals. You have a hydrochemical. You have storage of energy within your body due to liquids and chemicals and etc. You're not making any sense with the sun goes down. We should all be dead.
Okay, but he just said that we're powered by the sun.
That's a source of energy for the planet Earth.
Okay,
right,
but
the energy gets stored up in a way. Like, do you have any things that use rechargeable batteries?
Yes.
You know, you plug rechargeable batteries into the wall. They get power from the electric company. But after you pull the plug out of the wall, you've got these batteries which have stored up a charge, and they're not connected to the electric company, but they have a charge stored up that can power your, gizmos.
Which all comes from the natural lightning that comes from...
no, electricity doesn't all come from lightning. It's generated in a lot of different ways.
Yes, there's ways that we have found to create this electricity.
Your body creates electricity naturally. That's what moves all your muscles.
So how do
it gets powered
take
much
a shower
like
without being going into some electrical?
Oh, boy. How can you take a shower?
How can you take a shower without getting electrocuted? I don't know. Man.
You're right. You've got us.
You win. There's a God, and he hates me. No, seriously, I don't mean to belittle the caller at all, but if you're fundamentally lacking in scientific knowledge and how things work, go read. Hit the internet, stop by Wikipedia, do a search for something.
HowStuffWorks.com.
Yeah,
that is a great site.
Any number of things, because and this whole if our energy comes from the sun and the sun goes down, why aren't we dead? I mean, there are people who watch this program who would prefer that I just hung up on those calls the second they started.
We get emails about it all the time.
I don't like to do that because I'd like to actually have a conversation and perhaps help and educate some people. But if you're lacking in some fundamentals, take a few minutes, grab a book, grab a Christian book. There's Christian books that explain that stuff. Go to what's that? Carm.org, CARM.org. It's a Christian apologetics resource ministry, and they actually have a list there of arguments you should and shouldn't make for the existence of God. Mostly they have a list of arguments they want people to stop making. Don't be talking about moon dust anymore because that's been disproven.
In this case, I think how can you take a shower without being electrocuted is kind of so far out that they're unlikely to have cataloged that specific one.
Yeah. Is this Cartels?
Hello?
Yeah, you got like 20 seconds.
Okay. Hey, first of all, I'm a Christian and everything. I believe in Christ and God, and I do give you guys the time of day because you are entitled to your opinion. And I just want to ask you all one question: is where's the fruit in your life? I mean, and I'm not trying to be judgmental or anything. I'm watching you guys on TV, and I actually I watch you guys a couple times a month. I think you're on once a month, but where's the?
We're on every week.
Where's the success? I mean, do you have successful marriages? Financially, are you well off? Physically, are you well off?
I gotta let you go. We'll answer that as quick as we can.
Yes, I have some areas where I'm successful and some areas where I could be more successful, but I'm generally happy.
Yeah, we're on every week, and we live normal lives just like everybody else. We have people we care about. We have things we enjoy doing. Matter of fact, well, we don't have time.
Come to Threadgills.
Come to Threadgills.
Atheists, come to Threadgills.